Welcome to the Legacy LaunchPod, where we help families build and scale their online business to the six-figure mark and beyond so they can break the poverty cycle, build generational wealth, and make a huge impact in the kingdom of God. It all starts right here. All right, so we left off on part one with giving you a bit of the background and the backstory of where we were when we started. And so this is part two. We want to bring you up to speed with where we were and where we are currently and the things we're working on at the moment. So where we left off was the shock of going from poor carpenter and poor housewife taking care of little kids to a $2.5 million year after a failed ebook. And it really rocked our world in many ways. And a lot of people think, well, that must be like winning the lottery or something. But people who have been in business for a long time know when you have an explosive growth like that, actually how stressful it is. And so it was not like winning the lottery. I mean, in some ways it was kind of like, wow, pinch me. The whole year I was just like, somebody pinch me. I can't believe this is real. And on the other hand, it was so stressful because like we didn't know anything. Every single system and process you could think of that you need for a seven-figure business, we didn't have any of it. And we had to create it out of thin air. And a lot of times they were subpar, not good, not wonderful.
When we hit 2.5 million in our first year, every system and process was new to us.
Yeah, it was really stressful in that way and a bunch of other ways. But the bottom line is that it was a shock. It was a shock to the system, but then also there was our marriage, like our dynamics just completely changed. And we had to figure out, I mean, that was within a few months of launching that business, you quit construction. It was like, okay, I don't know how I'm going to fit in, but I'm going to find a way. We'll figure out a way to work together, even though none of us really even knew what our primary skills were or were going to be. We had to navigate it all from ground zero. Mm-hmm. And that was an awkward shift. Like,
yep.
I think there could be whole books written on this, and I don't know if anybody really has. When you go from very, let's say, traditional roles to suddenly the wife is, you could almost call it the primary breadwinner. And like, it was my idea. It was my rocket fuel that made it all happen. And then you're quitting your job and helping me do this thing together. And you were very much behind the scenes. And we're all just trying to figure it out. It was not an easy transition. I think that looking back, it's kind of amazing we made it through with any grace because it was tough.
It was very hard. And yeah, I think that's actually a good point. Probably a whole episode in and of itself is when we started, there was a couple of things. When you have fairly quick success, like we did, 2.5 million from nothing in a year, you don't know what that's going to be like. And also, like you were saying, the stark dynamic difference, the difference between going from being a carpenter, myself, and a homeschool mom, yourself, to now playing different roles in a business that has literally exploded overnight. And what do those roles even look like? And how do we function within that together and not be in conflict or in a negative competitive dynamic?
Yeah, trying to find the new groove is challenging. I don't want to go too far into that in this episode, but we will have a lot more to come on this because we've had to navigate so much around that. And especially with me being such a visionary startup entrepreneur with the ideas and the creative person and the kind of the driver, right? I'm often the one in the driver's seat in that respect. And yet we still believe in traditional roles. How have we made all that work? How do we align ourselves biblically? Because that's what we're trying to do. And also model all of this for our kids at the same time. So more to come on that because there's so many layers to dig into. So we'll come back around to that. But right now I want to finish up like where are we at now and what are we currently working on? So where we last ended up was we made this 2.5 million from a coaching business. Essentially, it's like courses. It was a courses and coaching business called Savvy Musician Academy. That's what it turned into. So that ebook that turned into a course, we developed an academy, Savvy Musician Academy, and it's still around. It's still there, but these days it's a lot more on the back burner. So it's maintained, but we don't. That's not really our active thing that we're putting all of our energy and effort into these days. And I will say that some of my interests and passions also shifted a bit. So about 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago now, I just knew after I'd worked with independent musicians for a long time that I needed a bit of a change, and I was getting quite an itch to do something else. And part of that itch involved e-commerce, because in teaching musicians about how to make a living and market their music online without a label, that's what Savvy Musician Academy is all about. I wasn't my own case study. I was always my own case study. So every album I would launch, every crowdfunding campaign, every single thing I was doing to build my email list and generate 20,000 a month or whatever in my business as an independent musician who never tours, I was always using myself as the case study. And in that, I was doing a crowdfunding campaign, and I basically came up with the idea of doing candles just as one of the rewards for one of the perks to see how I could create a more immersive listening experience for my fans. So that's where I came up with that idea. But I was also feeling this shift, like, I really want to test something. I teach everybody about e-commerce because when you're an independent artist, the only way you're really making money if you're not a touring musician like myself is through your actual music, selling your music over and over again, and then merchandise, right? So if you're selling merchandise online, you're in the business of e-commerce, whether you know it or not, you are. So I had a Shopify site. I would run all kinds of promotions, have all different kind of merchandise, right? From necklaces to t-shirts and you name it, all different things I would test. And so I was like, okay, so I've been doing this for my own, but what I wanted to see, can I do this from the ground up with a totally brand new audience and without my music at all? Can I do it as a standalone brand? So I basically wanted to challenge myself. Like, let's see if I actually know as much as I think I do. Okay, maybe SMA, maybe that success was a fluke. Those are the thoughts I was having. I was like, oh no, what if I can't repeat my results? That will be kind of embarrassing, but at least it would tell me where I'm at. And so I started a brand new candle company called Mythologie Candles, and I was thinking about it and dreaming about it and making notes, and I still have probably 15 pages of notes that I compiled during my market research part of it. I was able to build that company with a brand new audience, untested, unproven market, actually in a quite, I would say, saturated market. The candle market is extremely saturated by most people's understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And I still was able to make that business get to $1 million in about 9 months. And so again, it was one of those things where I was so passionate about it, I was dreaming about it. And it was one of those things where I actually said out loud, I'm making a decision. I actually said it on our SMA podcast at the time. I said to CJ, my co-host, mark my words, this business is going to go to $1 million in 12 months. Watch me. Very bold statement. Very, you can almost say almost arrogant, but I've learned later on that a lot of successful entrepreneurs do sound a little bit arrogant. They sound a little bit because they're so sure of themselves, because it's in their DNA. Like they've made a decision that something's going to happen, nothing will stop them. And that's always been my thing. It's like when I've made a decision and I'm all in and it's in my blood, like there's no going back, then it's a done deal. And this is where some people in the manifestation, new age woo-woo world will say, yeah, you manifested that because you believed it. Right. And so there's 5 other podcast episodes I want to talk about, but I've actually started writing about this in my email, by the way, if you want to know my viewpoint on this. But let's just call it like a rewiring of the brain for now. You make a decision that you want to be different or that you want something to happen, and then you literally start aligning your actions and your habits toward that thing. And there's nothing really woo-woo about that. It's just the way God designed our brains to function. So I did that. And then again, Steve was like, wow, this is cool, Leah. And he jumped in right away. We really have been partners this whole time. And so it's not just me on this, like he's been the whole operation side of everything. So did you think I was crazy nuts when I first started Mythology? Where you're like, oh, great, another thing she's doing?
Yeah, probably a little bit.
Because he's definitely more on the caution side of things, where I'm
Yeah.
more of the risk taker, I think.
You're the gas pedal, I'm the brake.
Yeah, and imagine when they're both trying to operate at the same time. You're pressing on both pedals at the same time. What happens?
Either you have a burnout, like your tires, smoke show, or you blow up the engine.
So something has to give, right? But the minute he saw that I was getting some traction with even just the interest and everything, I was like, okay, let's do it. Well, actually, the first thing was no problem because it was part of a crowdfunding campaign. So that was a matter of just fulfilling what people had already pre-ordered, essentially. So that was no big deal.
Yeah. But even that, I remember that. We're like, how the heck are we going to even do this? What's the first step? What do we need to do? What's the step, the software, the tech that we need? What are the physical components?
Are you talking about for fulfillment for crowdfunding?
Yeah, for fulfillment.
Yeah. So we had to work through all those things. These are all solvable problems. These are all
Totally.
very, very easy things to solve.
The point is, we didn't know what that we were doing, and we figured it out.
Yeah.
We figured it out along the way.
So then, okay, we officially launched Mythologie Candles in March of 2020. It was literally the month where everything hit the fan in 2020. You know what I'm talking about, people. I'm just going to say it, the pandemic, okay? We're not hiding anything on this podcast. Okay. So when all of that stuff happened and the lockdowns were in place and everything, everyone was home shopping. I'm sure you remember it. Remember the toilet paper wars and all of that. Well, that caused yet another explosive growth situation for us that we were not expecting. Only this time it wasn't digital, it was physical. And we had to try to somehow figure out how we were going to fulfill orders when basically all the supply chains were also shut down. So it was like, wow, everyone's so excited and ordering like crazy. And we were only doing pre-orders at the time. So we'd open up a pre-order and then close it, and then open up a pre-order and close it. And people have to wait 6, sometimes 8 weeks to get their product because of all the supply chain and shipping problems. And I was just thinking, wow, this is not a good start in terms of making a good impression on new customers and everything. But luckily, my history with customer service, I learned just be super transparent with everybody, bring them along the journey, just let them in, let them see what we're doing, tell them what's happening. And they were all very, very understanding. I don't even really remember any complaints during the time other than they would inquire, where's my order? And we tell them, go, oh yeah, I understand. So everyone was really understanding, which was amazing. But nonetheless, it was very, very stressful. Again, explosive growth. And as soon as we realized the potential of this, Steve and our passion was changing a little bit. And so we made an active decision that when Mythologie Candles reached a certain point, we would transition our salaries, essentially, that we would pay ourselves to Mythologie Candles, and we would take it off of SMA and we would just park it a little bit. It's going on the back burner. So we had to make an active decision because nobody can build multiple businesses at the same time unless you have large teams in place. And SMA, it was still a 7-figure business, but we just made a choice, essentially. Like when your passions change, it's like where your energy goes, that's where the money flows, essentially. So and I can only flow in one direction at one time. So and not that you can't, people do out there, when you get into the multi 7-figure level, have more than one business, but let's be serious. They are not doing it themselves. They have teams and general managers and other people running it that they have bought back their time through people. And then when those people are in place, they're able to leave and do other things. But they are not, no one person, no business owner is running multiple companies and doing day-to-day work in the business themselves. That doesn't happen. And at this point in Savvy Musician, we didn't want to actually build out a big team. Like we just chose a different direction. So that's what happened there. We transitioned our energy into Mythologie Candles because we just saw the potential. And so it's worked out really well. We're now 4.5 years in, which is crazy to think. That flew by. Yeah. And it's an 8-figure company now. And that's been fun. It's also been challenging because when everyone went back to normal shopping, the economy did shift and buying behavior shifted. And so we've had to navigate that, as well as millions of other online e-commerce stores have had to navigate the same trends. And so it's a little bit industry dependent, but we can transition now, talk about our current plans without getting into too much detail. So we have been humming along as a nice little e-commerce business, just selling direct to consumer, and that's been fine. But we have now decided to take a very purposeful approach to move into an expansion mode. And what does an expansion mode mean? It means opening up other channels, other forms of distribution, and
Other markets,
other markets.
other countries.
Yeah, geographical.
Yeah.
So one of the avenues that we are choosing to pursue now, and it's going very well, and I can't go into great detail, is
Licensing.
licensing. What's licensing?
Licensing is when you essentially get the rights to make a product or a service under the umbrella of another brand.
Yeah. So every time if you're on Amazon and like Star Wars t-shirts or something, those are licensed products. They're supposed to be anyways. Amazon is not supposed to sell unlicensed product. But so let's say a smaller t-shirt brand goes into they basically have the rights to use the intellectual property, the IP assets.
Mm-hmm.
Assets are the characters, the names, the places,
Yep.
the imagery from what's the parent company? Lucasfilms or whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Star Wars, Lucasfilms.
Lucasfilms, and I don't know who owns Lucasfilms. It's Disney, actually.
Disney bought them.
Yeah, Disney. Yeah. Okay, so the smaller company gets special permission to use that. And to enter into that agreement, there's a lot of negotiation. There's also fees and then royalties, right? So a lot of times, and I actually don't know about Disney, but I've heard like they're really expensive to work with. Like you might need $100,000 up front to just play ball. And that doesn't mean, and I actually don't know, I'm just making that up, but I think it's expensive.
Yep.
And so you pay a fee just to be able to use their IP, and then you pay them a royalty on every single product you sell. And it has to be super documented, and they have to approve everything. There's all these hoops you have to jump through because you're using their brand, their intellectual property.
And yeah, they're allowing you to use their assets, like you were saying, on your product, right? So don't screw it up because you're representing another brand.
Yeah, so there's all these rules and things, and that's how it's made. So right out of the gate, this is not a strategy for a new business to go into. The number one reason is that their margins aren't good enough to even consider this, right? So that's the biggest reason a new business would not consider licensing from anybody. You have to have, because remember, after it's all said and done, you have to pay yourself, you got to pay your employees, you have to pay for marketing, your overhead, all of that. And then one of these brands is going to want anywhere between 10 and 15% royalty. That also comes out of the margin, the top line margin. Did I say that right? Top line margin, or is that the wrong phrase?
Yeah. I mean, out of the margins.
Comes out of the margins. So then at the end of the day, you got to figure out, is there even anything left over? Is it even worth it? And this is why we have a whole lesson on this in Legacy LaunchPad. And I'm going to refer to this all the time, you guys, if you're listening to this. We have a whole thing on figuring out your COGS, right? Which is your cost of goods sold. I have a whole lesson inside of Legacy LaunchPad where you actually break down cost of goods sold and how to figure out your margins and how to know if they're healthy. How do you know if it's a healthy margin or not? If someone who's selling physical products ever wanted to go into licensing, what would they need their margins to be to even consider this as an expansion strategy? These are the questions that we have asked, and now we're in a position where we can actually pursue this route. So I can't talk to you more about what we've done yet, but I will soon enough. Like in the near future, I'll be able to go into detail about the IP holders, the brands that we are partnering with. And it's going to be a game changer for our business. And the main reason it's going to be a game changer for our business is because of the utilization, tapping into other existing audiences where there's a real passionate fan base already that we didn't have to create.
Yep. That's the key.
Yeah.
A passionate fan base.
It's also a global expansion strategy, meaning there are fan bases around the world, and it's not just selling to people in other countries and shipping it to them. the idea would be that we have, logistics centers in other geographic locations. So in Europe and Australia, maybe, or something, where you have a third party logistics somewhere where they're
Mhm.
shipping out of an actual warehouse your product locally there, so that the shipping
Yep.
costs make sense for the people ordering there. So that's another way, that's another expansion strategy.
Yep.
So I don't want to bore people too much with our business, but I just
No.
want people to know where we're at now, where that brings us today. And oh, by the way, we haven't talked too much about our kids yet, but we'll get into that. We
Mhm.
have 5 kids, and our oldest is 18, and he's unofficially graduated now. And our youngest is 9. And I say unofficially because, well, I don't want to get too into the weeds of that, but he chose to not get a diploma because of his career choice. So,
Yep.
yeah, you can do whatever you want when you homeschool, which is great, which means we don't have to conform to anything the government says that we have to do for the sake of it.
Exactly. Our job is not to replicate the government education system in our home. So now we've been at this point in business for 9 years, almost 10, right?
Yeah.
Started with nothing, started actually in debt, started almost in bankruptcy.
Mm-hmm.
And now we have created 2 multiple 7-figure businesses. One was a education-based platform. The other is our physical product business, which you were just talking about. And you have your coaching business.
Yeah, and
as
my
well.
music business. So my music
And your
business, my music business still makes 6 figures as a non-touring artist. And I barely touch that thing, and it's still bringing in 6 figures, which is pretty cool. And it pays for itself, right? Like, so
Yep.
I'm able to fund my albums. I'm able to pay a VA to help run my stuff in the background. And then I have my coaching business that I do on the side because I love it and it's fun. I don't have to do it at all, but I love it. It's like it's an itch I have to scratch. I just love sharing the knowledge, imparting any wisdom that I've got into other people and making an impact. And this program, Legacy LaunchPad, is it's not a year old yet. It's, I think, November is the official. So, and it's already done multiple 6 figures already. So it's on the way to being a third 7-figure company.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Yeah. When you come from nothing and you learn, you figure out how to make wealth and how to, build a legacy for your family. You want to share that with other people. Right?
It's
you
exciting.
You don't want to just keep it to yourself. And that's why you do the coaching, is not because you have to, because we don't actually need it for our family. We don't need the money, but you do it because of where we've come from and what the passion of sharing what you've learned. And this is all ties back into, what did God create us for? To advance his kingdom. He created us to advance his kingdom here on earth. And so we just figure, well, our calling, our ministry is actually in business. Our ministry is in our home, to our children, to educate them and raise them up in the ways of the Lord. And our other calling is to build businesses that bring him glory and influence the world for good. And through that, expand his kingdom.
Yeah.
That's our ministry. That's what we do.
Amen. That should give you a little bit of insight into our worldview and into some of our experience, a few of our struggles. And there's just so much more to come. There's so many layers and topics that I can go into that are not necessarily tactical training things that are in my program. Hey, thanks so much for tuning in today. Don't leave just yet. I've got 2 things. Number 1, if you enjoyed this content, if this was of any value to you, please leave me a review and share with a friend. This content is 100% free, so that's like leaving me a tip, and it's going to encourage us to keep making it. Number 2, if it's your desire to build your own family legacy and you want some help, send me a DM on Instagram with the word podcast, and I've got something special for you. Again, DM me with the word podcast at Real Leah McHenry on Instagram. We'll see you next time.